Hey, government friends. So today we are going to continue talking about chapter one. So, as you know, we first started out talking about the four theories of how government gains its power, comes to evolve, especially focusing on John Locke and the social contract theory. And then, you recently have done some research on your own about the different types of government. So, today we're going to take that a little further. And today we're going to focus on the three theories of democratic participation. So, basically, who has the ear of the government, right? So, as we look at this, first and foremost, we're going to identify government. We're going to identify what politics is, which is going to lead to, our participation into government as we look at these three theories. So, first and foremost, as we get rolling, let's talk about government. What is government? Right? Government is the institutions and processes through which public policies are made for society. So, there's different ways it can happen. As you know, you just looked at the different types of government. So, how are each one of those governments making policies for the society? But today, obviously, with American government, we're going to focus on the way we do it here in America. So, first off, as we know, Congress is going to be the institution that's going to make the laws. The president is going to execute the laws, and the courts are going to interpret the laws. So, that's how it works in America, and that's how our government functions to produce policies for society and citizens. So, this definition is going to lead us to two basic questions. Who is going to govern, right? So, as we look at the different types, who's going to govern, and then what should the government do? So, as it makes these policies, what should it do with them? Who's the policies going to benefit? So, that's a big time question, which leads into the other part of our government is, that dirty P word, politics. And politics is the process by which we select our government leaders and what policies these leaders produce. So, who has the ear of the government is the ultimate question. So, who is the government listening to? Who are they producing these for? And so that's what we're going to kind of get in today when we talk about, participation, democratic participation. So as we look at these, Laswell is from your guided reading question. We look at politics. Who gets what in our country, in our government, and when do they get it, and how do they get it? Right. That's the ultimate question when it comes to politics. Right. Who gets what, when, and how? Right. Laswell nailed it. So as we dig deeper and we look at our three theories of democratic participation, all right. So the first one we're going to look at is elitism politics. This is what we consider to be ruled by an identifiable group of persons who possess a disproportionate share of political power. So, meaning that this is a very narrow sense. Like the government is only going to give a very narrow percentage of the population the time, the energy, and whatnot. So, this is what we call the political elite. So again, when we talk about elitism politics, there's many different ways we can look at elitism politics, and we're going to look at some of the theories here in a second. But like, who has the ear of the government? Is it the celebrities? Is it CEOs of businesses and big corporations? Is it big pharma? Big pharmacy? Is it high military ranking officials? Who all these top people in their fields are? Is that who the government is listening to? Right. So this can be very hard and complex. Again, this is a very narrow issue, but this occurs when issues are not clear and complex, like something that's very, very controversial. Like abortion. We're not sure how all the constituents feel. Everybody's so mixed. These are so cloudy. So therefore, is this where the elites are going to take over? Is it going to be the political leaders? Is it going to be the government officials? We're not sure. So, this is this elitism politics, or it could be something that's, so big and broad, like universal health care. That's not clear how it's going to happen. That's not, it's very complex. And the average citizen's not going to know much details about it. So therefore, like, who do we listen to? Do we listen to the elites? So this is a very I shouldn't say big. This is a very narrow case of, the government having the ear of what we call elitism politics, a very small group of people. So as we look, Karl Marx, and when he wrote the Communist Manifesto, like he falls under this elitism, so with communism, we have the theory of history, the class struggles, the bourgeoisie versus the proletariat. So the proletariat were the lower class, and they get tired of being trampled on by the upper class. So then there's a violent overthrow of the bourgeoisie, who happens to be the upper class. And so therefore they create this utopia, and then everything is done for the state, and this is where communism comes about. So, that elitism, is that create that class struggle. So in the American democracy, the elites are the rich. They use their money to influence the system. So, we look at campaign contributions. Wait till we talk about campaign finance. I'm going to get you really fired up when we talk about that. And then, so it is a big issue. Another theorist that comes out of elitism politics, a guy by the name of C. Wright Mills, he wrote the book, The Power Elite. And in his book, he talks about how democracy is dominated by influential members in society, top military officials, media influence, celebrities, business leaders. So are these the ones that the government is giving attention to? Because they're the ones filling their pockets with campaign donations and things like that. I'll let you make that decision. So, just something to think about. All right, the bureaucratic theory I came up with a guy by the name of Max Weber in his book, Economy and Society. So he says, those inside the government are the elites. So, these are non-elected workers for the government. So, director of the FBI, members of the CIA, the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. These people have careers in the government, and they're the ones that put the details on the laws and the regulations. That's what the bureaucracy does, and we'll talk about that when we get to chapter 15 and we talk about the presidency. But he says, Mr. Weber is saying that these government officials, these non-elected workers for the government, are the ones that hold the political power. So that's something to think about. Pretty interesting. So all three of those examples fall under that elitism politics. All right, let's jump to our second theory of democratic participation. All right, so this one's going to be opposite of elitism. This one's going to have a very broad spectrum. So, right, this is when leaders are constrained to follow the wishes of the people very closely. So there's mass individual participation, which is going to lead to the wishes of the majority. So, when you got people participating, voting, or doing any other form of getting involved in government, whether it be like protest or other issues like that, three things for this need to happen. It needs to apply when issues are simple or clear. Yes or no. Do we want this? Yes. Do we not want it? No. Right? So then if enough attention is given to the interest of most people, then therefore, again, most people will participate in that democracy. And then lastly, another thing that needs to happen is this is a way to address what the public wants accomplished. So, participatory, it's clear, simple, it gets people interest, people go vote or do what they need to do to participate in government to get it done. This is a very broad spectrum of how people are participating, right? And this one's new. This concept is new. And when I say it's new, I mean it's not in your guided reading. It's not in your textbook. This is something that College Board has recently added with the redesign they did a few years ago of the class. So, and you probably won't see this in your book. But you will see this one. The third theory, pluralism. No single elite has a monopoly on power, which, we'll talk about in Federalist Paper 10, which we're going to talk about here shortly. We got to cover a lot of historical documents, which might show up on the AP test, but we'll worry about that later. But when we talk about pluralism, this is where people organize into groups based on interest, and they must compete for the influence, they must bargain, and they also must compromise while being responsive to followers. So the government must do all this. So we got a lot of groups that are seeking the ear of the government. So for instance, we look at one of the biggest interest groups out there is the National Rifle Association, the NRA. So, the NRA is competing to get laws passed to protect gun ownership. But there's also groups out there that are trying to get guns banned and get rid of the Second Amendment. So, there's groups that are competing for that attention for the government to make policies happen. But, there's all kinds of groups out there. There's like Mothers Against Drunk Driving. They call that MAD. And then you have like groups out there vying for senior citizens. You got groups vying out there for, people that are for abortion, people that are against abortion, people for the legalization of marijuana. There's all these groups out there that form. And again, is that good? Well, can be, because it creates that competitive, the bargain, the compromise, the influencing of people, good or bad. But the division into groups comes through specific issues, regions, demographics. And again, these groups can be any type of group that are just vying to get the ear of the power. So you got to look at pluralism, plural meaning many. Many groups have the opportunity to connect to the government. So, pluralism, many groups, many groups have that theory or have that opportunity. So, but the kind of opposite of that is hyperpluralism, right? So imagine that we are making a toothpick bridge and we're stacking bricks on it. What's going to happen the more and more bricks we stand on? And you got to kind of think about that like the government. You have the government sitting here and you have all these groups vying for power. Make these policies for me, make these policies for me. But then eventually it's going to get so many groups that it's just going to be too much and it's going to weaken the central government. And that's what hyperpluralism is, right? It's just, you got to look at it as hyper being like too many, right? So a sub-theory of government and politics contending that groups obtain so much strength that the government is a puppet. The central government is just weakened, right? So groups control policy at the expense of the wishes of the majority. So again, does this lead us back to the strongest groups survive and elitism? Because some groups aren't that big, aren't that strong, aren't that boisterous. So it all depends, right? So think of any of examples that you can of hyperpluralism. All right, there's many out there. All right, so if you have any questions about the three theories of participatory democracy, let me know. All right, guys, have a great day. See you later.